Hello, and welcome to Don't Shout at the Telly, with me, your host, Joe Vandervoort. This month, we're lucky to be joined in the studio by the writer and architect Karl Sharro, who, along with a panel of WORLDwrite volunteers, will be discussing the current conflict in Gaza. Karl, would you like to take us through what you think are the key issues?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is an opportunity for us to all start thinking about politics more seriously and how it affects our lives. I understand that these are particularly emotive times, and seeing the media coverage of the situation might make people more emotive about the subject, but there is still an opportunity here to look and say there is a chance for us to look at an alternative way of dealing with politics. And I think what happens normally is, under, if you like, the intensity of the situation, that people tend to reduce an aspect of a conflict that's somehow removed from our lives into black and white issues, and we tend to oversimplify it. And the media encourages us to think about it in a somewhat distorted manner. The overriding sense now about this conflict in particular, this latest episode in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, is there is a sense of victimhood. Both parties are claiming, if you like, that they are more victimized by this situation. And what this creates to the outside world, it's the sense that these people have to be pitied, and we have to take sides based not on political aspirations, say political aspirations of the Palestinian people for the right to self-determination, or the political aspiration of Israel for security, but rather that it's a victimhood game, it's a pity game, and who's the party that lays more claim to that kind of thing then attracts more sympathy. We want to take this opportunity of this discussion to say what is the problem in that particular way that the kind of the conflict has been covered. What is wrong with saying it's about victimhood? What I would like to say is, if we look historically in the beginning, just to give you a glimpse, I guess, the conflict has been always played around, if you like, the Palestinian sense of self-determination in the past, led in one way or another to a recognition that there's a cause in there. At the same time, historically, which is something we cannot deny, there's a sentiment among Jewish people from different parts in the world for different historical reasons that they needed to have a country, if you like, where they can feel safe. And this is something that they would want to contest. But unfortunately, whereas these things in the past have led to the creation, for example, of Israel, an independent state, and a sense of struggle for the Palestinians about how they can claim back their rights, this seems to have disappeared today. This disappearance of a healthy sense of politics is what leads us to the situation we are in today. First of all, the Israelis, because they don't have a notion of how they want to organize their society politically and socially and interact with their neighbors according to a political platform, which used to be known as Zionism in the past. Because of the void and the disappearance of that thing, they tend to react more in this violent outburst that we see. At the same time, the use of violence by the Palestinians is not today aimed at a specific political target. It's not towards. In the past, you used to hear about the binational state. It's a state for Jews and Arabs together. That has disappeared altogether. So any sense of firing rockets and Operation Suicide bombings does not actually mean that there's a fight for a specific political aid. It just seems to be saying, we're here, this is about a sense of identity rather than a political project. And across the divide, that is extremely an unhealthy situation that will lead to a further deterioration in the future. And we need to step back, and both parties need to step back from that and look at how they can overcome this paralysis, if you like, that's leading them to meaningless, bloody confrontation into something much more politically meaningful.
Can we just go back to the point you made about victimhood and saying there's one is seen as a victim and one as the perpetrator? Is that the point you're trying to make?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in a sense, if you look, for example, at Facebook updates, there was this thing that you can donate your Facebook update to either side, either to the Palestinian or the Israeli. And in the Palestinian side, there was this thing that 875 people killed today, 4,200 injured. And so it wasn't saying that this is a deep problematic problem that we are facing politically and we need your support and solidarity because these are our aims. It was just trying to say to you, And I admit, it's catastrophic. A lot of people are dying. But just the pornography, if you like, of the obsession with the numbers is not a healthy way to understand that conflict. And you see then both parts started competing in the so-called propaganda and media war. And it's as if this is where the war is won, not on the battlefield. How can we prove to the outside world that we are the victims, rather than we are people who have an aspiration that we need to fulfill?
In the sort of the most recent, what's just happened this month, the bombardments, it's definitely, I've sort of felt the media's given a very anti-Israeli look on it. And it's very also seen Palestine as the victim in this case. And I've read a few things, and a lot of people seem to be saying that there's been an increase in anti-Semitism because of this. There's been like calls to boycott Jewish shops and stuff, and quite bad stuff. I mean, do you think that's something that anti-Semitism is something that's going to come back up into this sort of the whole role of it? Do you think that's going to?
I think there are worrying signs that anti-Semitism is on the rise, but not in the traditional forms that it used to exist in Europe, because those had different reasons in the past. What is happening today is precisely because the issues have become so clouded. People are just hitting back, if you like, without thinking about the consequences, without thinking about whether their actions are going to lead to any result. So, for example, if you talk about the boycotts, whether it's on either side, this is not really a way to change the world around you. It's just a way to make you feel better. And if you are, say, Jewish living in Europe or in America, or if you're an Arab living in Europe or in America, and you sort of stop going to Starbucks, then you feel a sense of accomplishment that is actually effectively on the ground completely ineffective. Even if it were effective, even if the actions of consumers in the West and governments in the West were effective, I would even argue that against that kind of attitude, because, as I say, for Palestinians, and it should be for Jews as well, for everyone who lives in that area, their aim should be how to arrive at a society that everybody is equal in, how to arrive at self-determination, and not let that be dictated by foreign government or foreign consumers. I would be really worried if I got to the point where Western consumers can determine how my life is led anywhere in the world, not only in Palestine.
In a way, I feel like that's slightly an outdated idea, I think, because if we live in a global society now, and to suggest that we can go back to what sounded to me a very modern style of politics seems to be a little out of touch with the way that wars happen. I mean, consumer movements and consumers' decisions do affect countries. I mean, let's just say Finland, Nokia is a huge percentage of their economy. If something happens to Nokia, Finland's in trouble. So, I mean, how do you propose that in such a global society we can go back to this almost modern local politics?
I would just contest the last bit that you said, in the sense that it's local. There's always, to any struggle, there is a global dimension, and this is something, if you think back of the Spanish Civil War, why would volunteers from Britain carry arms and go there to fight? And this is at the kind of the height of modern politics and anti-fascism. Why would they do that? They were not just sitting comfortably in their cafes over here saying, I'll drink fair trade coffee instead of drinking Starbucks. They actually felt that conflict meant so much to them for them to carry arms and go and fight. And there was enough of a political structure around to give them that opportunity. So I'm not saying this is a form of nostalgia to that. I'm saying if you wish to be engaged in a political struggle that does not actually touch your life on a daily basis, because let's face it, we're not Palestinians, we're not living in a refugee camp, or we're not Israelis in the middle of the... We were looking at it from a distance. I would say there's a place for solidarity. There's always place for solidarity. How that solidarity is orchestrated and how that solidarity becomes meaningful is a different thing. I would say in most forms of consumer boycotts and that sort of thing, it doesn't seem to me that the point is that it's healthy politically or kind of leading to change on the ground. It more seems to be about our own smugness, our own self-indulgence.